Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Q&A with Chug. Each week, we cover pressing topics that matter to you and your business. I'm Arianna Gonzalez from Chug Attorneys and CPAs. Please join me in welcoming partner and attorney Mishita Jethi from our Edison, New Jersey office. Hi there, Mishita, and welcome.
Hi, Ariana. Very good to have you. Very good to be with you here. How are you?
Thank you so much for being here. For today's topic, we will be exploring post H-1B cap registration options. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started, this conversation is for informational purposes only, and it does not create an attorney-client relationship. So please comment your questions below or email us anytime at info@chuk.com. Let's get right into it, Mishita. So the cap registration window is closing. I believe tomorrow. Can you confirm that for us? What happens if we haven't registered yet?
Right. You're absolutely right. The CAP registration window does close tomorrow, and we have a very short time left. The good news is that we still have about a day. And, if you're an employer thinking of sponsoring an employee for H-1B, registering them, or if you're an employee looking for someone to assist you with that, of course, please reach out to your trusted immigration attorneys. Our team at Shug is always happy to help. We have just about a day left. So hopefully nobody was waiting up until today and for this session to make that decision. But if you were, this is your time. Please make sure that you register any candidates you were thinking of sponsoring latest by tomorrow, 12 p.m. ET.
Wonderful. Are the fees going up next year? Are there any benefits to filing this year? What do we have to know about that?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. So, as of this year, until this year, the registration fee is only about $10. It's a $10, right? Next year, the fee is likely going to be $215 for the registration. So that's a huge jump. It's more than $200 of worth of increase. So anyone who's thinking of registering this year, I think it's a very small amount in terms of fees. So go for it. You never know, you might get selected this year. And then next year, the employer would not have to spend that additional $205 for the registration.
Wow, that's a huge jump in fees. So definitely make sure you're filing this year if you're interested in registering because this is the time. So Mishita, can you share with us who is eligible for registration?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, any foreign national, any beneficiary, potential beneficiary who has either already completed a bachelor's degree or is likely to have completed their bachelor's degree by June of this year would be eligible to submit their registration for the bachelor's cap. However, anyone who has either already completed a master's degree from a U.S. institution or is likely to have completed their master's degree from a U.S. university by June of 2024, they're also eligible for the advanced master's cap. The advantage is that there is 20,000 H-1B registrations, which are reserved just for those who are eligible for the master's cap. So, in case one of the beneficiaries who's listening out there, if you have a US degree, be sure that you get registered for the master's cap because you would be eligible.
So what about the people who applied for registrations already? Can they resubmit this year? Is that allowed?
Yes, anyone who submitted a registration last year, but unfortunately maybe did not get selected, they continue to remain eligible because they would have completed their bachelor's degree or their master's degree, and they have, if they still have a potential offer from an employer who's willing to sponsor them for H-1B, they can reapply this year. The mere fact that someone registered last year and probably did not get picked or something happened does not automatically bar them from re-registering this year. So you could still apply. And again, if you're on the fence of it, please make sure that you speak out to your employers, reach out to immigration attorneys, and get yourself registered.
Wonderful. That's great to know that there's another opportunity for this. So how long will employers and employees have to wait to get the results of this CAP registration? The golden question.
Yes, I know. I'm sure so right now everyone's looking to register and, finish that up by tomorrow, and then everyone will wait for the results. So We expect USCIS will start rolling out the results of the lottery by next week. Typically, we expect that the H-1B filing period will open by 1st of April 2024, which is, coming up very quickly. So we expect that USCIS will come up with the registration lottery results by next week. So that, gives the employers and employees some time to ramp up and then start filing from 1st of April. So yeah, this time next week, more likely than not, most of the employees and the employers will start getting the lottery results.
That's wonderful. That's coming up pretty quickly. So make sure you're checking up the status if it's coming soon. So make sure you're staying on top of that if you did register. So Mishita, can we go back a little bit? And I know you filed a lot of these H-1B cap registrations for a lot of employers. And I'm wondering, when should employers start thinking about cap registration? When is the most ideal time to start thinking about this?
That's a great question, Arianna. Ideally, employers should start thinking about registration in March. And I don't mean for this year. They should start thinking in March for next year. And I think that, the reason for that is, although it seems that the actual registration is a very short little thing, you just have to put in the name of the beneficiary, the passport details, etc., biographic information. But I'm sure, as a lot of employers would appreciate, a lot of planning goes into deciding who needs to be sponsored, which employee would they like to hire and sponsor for H-1B. A lot of time, these are employees who have been, freshly hired right out of universities, right? So the employers then have to figure out that if we hire this person, next year, this time, we would have to start thinking about registration for them because soon after their F1, depending on whether these students have qualified for STEM OPT or not, employers may typically have any time between 1 and 3 years of employment before they have to then make a decision about sponsorship. So ideally, you want to start thinking of that process a year in advance so that if the employers want to, vet the candidates, see their performance, make sure that, they are the right fit, the right mix for them, they have some opportunity to, see them work either through OPT, STEM, or any other process. And then they want to reach out to their attorneys to figure out towards the end of the year, when do we start the process, what will happen, figure out where is an job opportunity available, where they can fit this candidate. So I think that's why, it takes a very long time to strategize all of this. That's why ideally start thinking as soon as possible. That's why I say as soon as the lottery closes this year, start thinking about next year and reach out to your HR professionals and other stakeholders, have those meetings, those discussions, so that by the time next year rolls around, you're already prepared for next year's lottery.
That's wonderful advice, Mishita. So yes, if you are an employer and you're thinking about the H-1B cap registration, you should start thinking about it now. And if you have any questions, we would love to help you out. You can email us anytime at info@trig.com. We'll connect you with Mishita. So Mishita, let's talk about what happens after a registration is selected. As many already know, this year USCIS has come up with quite a few changes to the registration. And
Yeah,
this means that each beneficiary will be considered a unique entry. So how is this different from previous years? Can you share some information on that with us?
absolutely, Ariana. That's a great question. So, back up a little bit. So from 2020 onwards, USCIS, in order to streamline the process of, H-1B cap selection, they changed the process a little bit earlier. And some of the practitioners and employers may remember, it used to be that employers and the attorneys would submit the entire prepared H-1B petition, and they would mail it out within the first 5 business days of April. And then USCIS would, pick the number of candidates that had submitted the petitions. And, once they hit the quota, all the ones that were either not selected or rejected would be sent back to the employers. So we used to send really thick petitions all at once. But USCIS tried to streamline that process so that now, instead of submitting completed petitions, the employers only submit, very basic biographic information of the potential beneficiaries. But what happened with that is, in order to either, just increase the chances of people getting selected, or perhaps due to various other reasons, USCIS noted a trend where there were multiple registrations submitted for the same beneficiary. And USCIS, according to them, this was to show that either there was some fraud being perpetrated, or people were just, putting multiple registrations even without having bona fide job offers, only to get selected and then somehow get themselves, sponsored by employers. So this year, USCIS has sort of changed that process a little bit, and they have made it more beneficiary centric, so that instead of every registration being considered as a unique entry, they would consider the beneficiary themselves as a unique registrant. And once that gets picked, or if someone who's been sponsored or who's being registered by multiple employers, once somebody gets picked, then they would figure out who to work with, which employer would actually submit their petition. All of these, this is very new, this is brand new, this is the first year it's happening, so we're all going to navigate it in the next coming months. But the overarching theme is that USCIS is trying to make it more beneficiary centric, and is trying to sort of, weed away any multiple registrations which were done merely with the intent of increasing the chances, or these so-called like non-bona fide job offers. So yeah, that's the big change. Beneficiaries will hopefully have a slightly a better experience, because instead of trying to have multiple companies register for them and then not being able to navigate that, they will have some time to figure out which company they would eventually want to go through with.
That's wonderful. So the registrants will have some time to decide and file the petition?
Yes, absolutely. So once USCIS, announces the result of the lottery selections, after that, employers and employees, employers will be submitting the petition, but they have up to 90 days. So between 1st April and 30th June, the employers who decide to sponsor beneficiaries will be able to submit the petition. And this is crucial, right? Because a lot of things may change in those 90 days, right? Sometimes beneficiaries may reject job offers. They may have agreed earlier on, but later on they might either reject offers, or they might have a change of situation, or the employers themselves, they may have a change in their need to sponsor beneficiaries. So there is some time, there is some time to really think and strategize and then file the petition. It's not immediately like, all right, we've got the result today and tomorrow the petition has to be out. And I think even from as practitioners, I think it's good to have a little bit of time, and then space out those petitions, really think about the strategy. And there are sometimes a lot of strategies that go into it. I know personally, for example, there are a lot of employers who sometimes want to submit the H-1B petition, but they may not want the candidates to change status, from F1 to H-1B immediately. And that just gives some time to the employer to talk to their attorneys, figure out how to strategize that, how to file a petition such as that, instead of doing like a quick rush job. So yeah, remember, you have 90 days to file the petition once a beneficiary gets selected.
That's great to know that there's some time to decide if this is something that they really want to go through with. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what happens if someone's registration is not picked up. If somebody doesn't get that email next week that they were properly registered. So what happens?
Right. So first, I would say, don't give up hope. right? Because in the previous years, we've seen USCIS has conducted multiple drawings, so much so that I think in 2022, they did three rounds of lottery selections. So just because someone did not get selected this time around, doesn't mean that there's just, going to be no other lottery selection. There could be one. So keep your fingers crossed, and hopefully there might be another drawing and you would get selected. Now, talk about what if, that does not happen, right? Hopefully the employees or the beneficiaries have thought this through and they already have some of the backup options. If not, they can consider, there are various other visa types that they could consider as backup options. Maybe we could go through some of them, right?
Yeah, I'd love for you to share what those options are.
Okay. So one of them, and this is some of the most common ones, is a lot of beneficiaries who get registered are typically students in either in US universities pursuing their bachelor's or their master's. So they have this option where they can actually apply for OPT, which is either a 1 year of practical training or 3 years of practical training, depending on whether they qualify for STEM or not. And that's just, that gives them the opportunity to continue looking for jobs. And once they find the job, to continue working for their employer for a period of 1 to 3 years, even before they get selected in the H-1B lottery. And that's valuable, right? Because just think about someone who's graduated. If they had no other option of continuing to stay in the United States, no employment opportunity, and if their entire employment authorization was only tied to H-1B and they had this one shot, and if they did not make it, and if we had to tell them, well, you just have to pack up and go, that's a little disheartening. So the good news is, for anyone who's a student on F1 status, at the very minimum, they'd have 1 year of employment. And depending on whether their field qualifies for a STEM extension, they'd have 2 more years. So that's one of the big ones.
Wonderful. So thank you for sharing all of that information with us. So how do you improve chances of getting selected, and what should we stay away from in this process?
Right. So I think, as I was saying earlier, we should, or the beneficiaries should really try to steer clear from any job offers that are not really, they're not bona fide, they're not genuine. There are a lot of consultants out there who might try to steer beneficiaries and say, for a certain amount of money, we'll register you and we'll give you a job, and there really isn't a job available, right? As I was alluding to earlier, now that USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, DOS, Department of State, all of them together have started cracking down on some of these perceived fraudulent, practices. I think the beneficiaries really have to make sure that they protect themselves, because if they get entered into the lottery by, through non bona fide offers, what will happen is, eventually, if the Department of State, denies a visa, then it'll be very difficult to get visas in any other categories, right? And I'll come back and talk about some of the other visa categories that people could think of in terms of backup. But that would be like the one big thing. Make sure that you are not pursuing any unscrupulous means just to get into the lottery, because consider that this is something which is long term, right? You want to make sure that if you have that if you want to work in the United States, this is not just this one shot. You could get, as I said, you could re-register for the H-1B again and again. But what you don't want is for the THS or DOS to blacklist you and just never get a visa, right? As I was saying, for those who are on F1, and especially those who are on F1 STEM, right? You have 3 years, and you could continue getting yourself registered in those 3 years. But at the same time, one of the popular options, depending on the kind of work that these beneficiaries do, would be to build up their profile. These days, O1 has become a very popular option as a visa category for those who don't get selected, for H-1B. The advantage of O1 is that it's not subject to any cap. It's not subject to like this one-time lottery every year, right? There is no limit to the number of O1 visas that can be filed. So if you're able to show that you're someone who is extraordinary in their field of endeavor, right? Then you can have an employer sponsor you for O1. And again, depending on the kind of work that someone does and their education credentials, we have some very, very competent attorneys who can assist these beneficiaries navigate filing the O1 petitions. And then the advantage of O1 is that it can keep getting extended for as long as the beneficiaries and the employers want. Unlike H-1B, where there is a 6-year limitation, O1s can be renewed indefinitely. So that's, again, a very popular option, depending on the field of endeavor. And if you have any more questions on that, I'm sure, like I said, we have a lot of very competent, terrific attorneys in our firm who can assist with that. Some of the other options could be, assuming you don't get selected in the lottery this year, the beneficiaries may want to figure out if they have any alternate citizenship that could maybe assist them. So we have a number of visas which are available to citizens of certain countries where where the United States has entered into treaties with them. So, for example, if you're Canadian or if you're Mexican, you could consider seeing if the TN visa is a good fit for you. If you have Australian nationality, you could consider seeing if the E3 visa is a good fit for you. Those are also for, like highly skilled employees, both the TN and the E3. There are certain citizenships in the world that allow you to apply for the E2 visa. These are also treaty investor visas. Again, we have tons of attorneys who do this regularly and for so many different citizenships. So reach out to one of us and we can assist you if you're thinking of applying through the E2 visa route. For Argentinian and Chilean citizens, for Chilean and Singaporean citizens, we have the H-1B1 visa, which is again a category which is exclusively for those citizenships. So sometimes when beneficiaries think about H-1B, they don't consider that there could be other opportunities available, and some of them could simply be tied to their citizenship. And speaking of citizenship, sometimes consider what is the citizenship of your spouse. And, if you have a spouse who's working in the United States and if there is a dependent category that you could go on because of them, for example, if your spouse is on H1, you could consider getting on H4. And then that opens up the opportunity for employment depending on certain, requirements if you and your spouse meet that. If your spouse is on L1 visa, you could consider getting on L2, which allows you to work again because L2s are allowed to have work authorization. Another popular category is the cap exempt H-1B, right? So this is where beneficiaries, and this is especially useful for beneficiaries who are probably working in university settings or nonprofits or similar educational institutions, because these are a group of employers who are actually allowed to file H-1B all year round. And these H-1B petitions don't count towards the cap. So if you're working for, if you're a student at a university and, if you are going to continue working there, maybe let's say you're going to work as a research assistant to a professor and you're doing like some cutting edge work, reach out to your university and see if they would consider sponsoring a cap exempt H-1B for you. And the cool thing about if you have a cap exempt H-1B is that then you can actually have another cap subject employer file a concurrent petition for you. So obviously you would have to maintain your cap exempt H-1B visa status, but you can have another employer which is subject to the cap file a concurrent petition for you. And this is again something that a lot of beneficiaries may either not know or may not be aware of. And I would encourage them to, just seek out, speak to their DSOs at their university and check if the university might be eligible to do this or might be willing to do it. Then another option for some beneficiaries who may have previous work experience with companies abroad would be that if they work for a company abroad for a particular number of years, in a specialized field or in a particular managerial position, and if these employers want to transfer them over to the United States, in an affiliate organization or in a subsidiary, then they can file for the L1 visa, which is essentially it's an intra-company transfer. So multinational managers or specialized knowledge individuals who may have worked for companies abroad, they may want to get transferred to the United States under the L1 visa. Another option that comes to the top of my head is that if you're in school and if you've completed one level of education, and let's say you were not selected in the lottery, consider if it's possible to re-enroll in school to get to the next level of education. So if you've done bachelor's and if you've completed that, and if your means allow it, and all the other situations are conducive, maybe you could consider doing the master's here. It gives you a lot of advantages. Like I said, one is you become eligible for the master's cap, right, which is this exclusive 20,000 registrations. The second is that it gives you another bite at the apple, because at the end of your master's degree, you will once again be eligible for the F1 OPT. And obviously, if your degree is in the STEM field, that gives you 3 additional years, right? That's not to say that, anyone should just enroll in the master's program simply for the sake of that. But if your field is such that going through an additional master's will also increase your job chances, opportunities, you should definitely consider doing that. There are certain industries where another kind of visa option may be allowed, which is the J1 visa. So if you're going to come to the United States for short-term trainings, there are also physicians, right, who could go under the J1 category of visa. That is yet another option. Finally, if there are beneficiaries who are here already and they just want to stay on for a couple of months, just to figure out what other options could be available to them. Or if they just want to speak to some employers, see, sometimes what happens is, you have not enough time to actually secure the job offer. And you say, okay, if I just have a few more months, just to see if someone could maybe, sponsor me for one of these other categories, but I want to meet them and I want to make sure that they see me first. You could consider changing your status to B2, which is a visitor visa. Be very, very careful that this does not allow you to work. So as a visitor in the United States, you cannot work. You can at best hold, business meetings, or you could hold, like, if you're going for interviews or things like that. So if you're a student and if you were almost there, but you couldn't quite get all the interviews, maybe you didn't get the opportunities that you thought you would, you could maybe consider changing status to B2. That allows you to stay on for 6 more months. Sometimes, just getting that FaceTime allows people to, see you, and then maybe you could crack one of those interviews. And then, that particular employer may come up with another option, immigration option for you. So if you just want to stay on to give a few more interviews while you figure all of this out, converting to B2 could also be an option.
Wow, absolutely wonderful insights, Mishita. Thank you for sharing all of those options with us. That does sound very promising. There are so many visas to choose from, so if you do have questions, please reach out to us. We are running out of time here, Mishita, but I do want to get one last question in. What should one do if they're unsure of this process? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, the first thing you should do is definitely reach out to an experienced immigration attorney. Hold a consult. talk to them about what your situation is. Obviously, every situation is unique, and there is never a one size fits all answer. But in speaking with an attorney, they might be able to help you figure out what your next steps could be, right? And I think any immigration attorney would also try to guide you as to what is the correct way of going through this process, right? And then maybe you have an employer who's willing to sponsor you and is almost ready to register, but is just very unsure, particularly given the various technical glitches at the USCIS website and so many things. So you can connect your employer with one of the trusted immigration attorneys so that they can assist the employers in navigating this entire process smoothly and without making any errors that could potentially be fatal, because as we know, the registration happens once a year. And if there's anything that goes wrong, either with the registration, if you did not get registered, you won't get that opportunity for an entire year. So you want to make sure that you have a trusted immigration attorney as your advisor and as your partner in this process, along with your employer.
Such great advice, Mishita. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. That is all we have time for today, so this does bring us to the end of our conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. A special thank you to you, Mishita. To stay up to date, please subscribe and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you have any questions or suggestions or want to let us know what topic you want to see next, please send us an email anytime at info@chuk.com. We would love to help you out, and make sure to join us back here next week for more pressing topics that truly matter to you and your business. Until next time, stay safe and take care, everyone.